Biden administration is releasing more than 13,000 records tied to President John F. Kennedy's assassination, but withholding thousands more, citing national security concerns. The documents revealed that Lee Harvey Oswald, who said weeks earlier in Mexico he wanted to kill Kennedy, was being closely tracked by both the CIA and FBI. Why weren't these documents released years earlier?
In 1963, if Americans had seen this stuff, they might have said, why did the FBI and CIA let our president be assassinated?
One document shows how the CIA intercepted a phone call Oswald made to the Soviet embassy in Mexico City weeks before the assassination on a wiretap arranged with the help of Mexico's president.
Why wasn't any of that information quickly passed on to Washington so the Secret Service could act to make sure that this man Oswald wasn't a threat to the president of the United States?
On that fateful day, the president and First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy arrived in Texas on a campaign swing. Riding in a limo through downtown Dallas, shots ringing from a third-floor window.
President Kennedy died at approximately 1 o'clock Central Standard Time.
Oswald was arrested and charged with the murder, but a short time later in a Dallas police station, he was shot and killed by Jack Ruby, as stunned Americans watched live on NBC.
He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot.
The Warren Commission concluded Oswald acted alone, but over the decades, Kennedy's assassination has spawned countless conspiracy theories, dramatized in movies like Oliver Stone's JFK.
Why was Kennedy killed? Who benefited? Who has the power to cover it up?
John Kennedy's assassination, sadly, will never be fully solved. That was probably cinched the day that Lee Harvey Oswald was killed in that police station in Dallas.
And joining me now is NBC News presidential historian Michael Beschloss. Michael, so what do you think are the biggest outstanding questions in what was not released, the redacted
Well, I think two things, and I think the future documents may actually show us a little bit more about this, but it will never settle the question for everyone. One is, Oswald was in amazingly close touch with people from the Soviet Union, not only as a defector to the Soviet Union who redefected, came back to Dallas in 1962, but also went to that Soviet embassy in Mexico, and the same thing with the Cuban embassy. So LBJ in 1963, dealing with all this, the last thing he would have wanted was to have a lot of information out at that time suggesting that Oswald may have acted on behalf of the Soviets and the Cubans because, as Johnson said in his private tapes, Americans will demand that I get into a war that could kill 60 million people. So he saw it as a political problem. The other side of this was that, as we now see in document after document, the FBI in Dallas, which was not a very big city compared to now in those days, was tracking Lee Harvey Oswald and his family, to the point that Oswald, not long before the assassination, was complaining to FBI agents that they were bothering his wife. They knew exactly who he was, knew that he was a Soviet defector, knew who he was in touch with, yet FBI never bothered to tell the Secret Service, get this guy out of the Texas School Book Depository because the president's limousine is going to be within rifle range of that building for nearly a minute. So if Americans had found that out in 1963, they might have said, why did the FBI let our president be killed and put him in such a vulnerable position?
And have you figured out why the FBI did not warn the Secret Service?
One reason is bureaucratically in those days, and it's less now, and it's improved after 9/11 and the Department of Homeland Security, remember, which the commission said that there were too many silos that led to 9/11. Well, there was almost hatred between J. Edgar Hoover and the Secret Service in 1963. So he didn't want to tell the Secret Service very much. And the other intriguing question is, we know that Edgar Hoover hated Kennedy, was very close to Lyndon Johnson, who was his neighbor in Washington. I'm not suggesting that he deliberately did this, but there may have been benign neglect that Hoover may have said, okay, if Kennedy is going to do these things that I don't like, maybe I'm not going to strain too hard to protect him, especially in a city like Dallas, where the violence of the radical right had been expressed.
And when you think about all of this, the president of Mexico helped the CIA with surveillance of Oswald. They were tracking him. They knew exactly where it was. I mean, it just
totally.
seems...
The two together were taking pictures of coming to those embassies. There were pictures of Oswald literally on the doorstep. We believe that there were tapes of what he might have said with them on the telephone. So there's a big history of Oswald dealing with the Soviets and the Cubans before Dallas 1963, just as there is of the FBI and CIA not doing what they should have. And take your pick. We have to keep on asking these questions, and maybe the final documents to be released will enlighten us more. But my guess is that this is going to be a mystery for everyone into eternity.
And when we have all of these conspiracy theories, I mean, the president says he's not releasing 4,300 pages, the final pages, even though that law in 1992 said that everything should be out from the archives because of national security. Is this just to help prevent embarrassment for these agencies?
Well, I think one reason is embarrassment, because if they really show close ties between Oswald and the CIA, there are a lot of Americans who are going to be very suspicious and say, did Oswald shoot President Kennedy on behalf of the CIA? No document has suggested that yet, but in the climate of 2022, that's what people will say. And the other thing is that they're allowed to keep back documents because they might reveal currently used sources and methods of the FBI and CIA, or jeopardize relations with a friendly government like Mexico. That's why I was a little bit surprised that they released that document showing how closely the Mexican and American intelligence services were acting together.
Michael Beschloss, who has just about spent his entire life on this period, other periods as well, but this period, and also, of course, the LBJ tapes and LBJ. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea.